Kia ora and welcome to our second workshop on autism. So this one is focused on sensory sensitivities, which is the support area for most autistic people. So we are going to talk about sensory sensitivities and how to support that. So we are bringing this webinar from Altogether Autism, which is under your Reiki Aroha. So this is us, Altogether Autism. Our website is www.altogetherautism.org.nz. We provide trusted autism information and advice in New Zealand, Aotearoa. So we have a national DIAS contract in partnership with Parent to Parent, which is our one of our parent organizations, basically Parent to Parent and your Reiki Aroha. We're under both. We offer tailored free information and advice for autistics, their families, and whānaus. So this is free and part of the contract that we have with Ministry of Health. And also you can contact Altogether Autism via live chat on the website and our free phone, which is 0800 273 4663, or email us to info@altogetherautism.org.nz. So this is us, and you can always come to us if you have any questions on autism and need any advice or support. Now, sensory sensitivities. What are sensory sensitivities for autistic people and how we can support this? So, our central nervous system, or our brain, processes all the sensory information we receive. We receive the sensory information like a sound that comes to our ears receive it, but sends to our brain, and our brain is the part that processes and makes and thinks, okay, this is a sound of a bird singing. This helps us to organize, prioritize, and understand the information. So like our brain decides, okay, this is a bird singing, so this is not a priority for me at the moment. I need to focus on this talk that we have, so I can ignore this sound. So prioritizes the information that we need to pay attention to. We then respond to the information we receive through our senses in an appropriate way. So either ignore it or enjoy it, or like this, or like if it was a sound of like a door being slammed, a loud bang, my brain, if received it as a threatening sound, I would run away, respond in run awaying, like kind of like way. But also if my brain received it as like door being slammed, you can ignore it, I would just sit here and ignore it. So our reaction depends on what we understand about this sound. For example, our brain decides we blink in response to bright light. Many, but not all, people with autism have difficulty processing sensory information. This can be called sensory processing difficulties or sensory sensitivity. So, but remember, when looking at sensory sensitivities, remember to always check the physical, like eyesight, sore teeth, headaches, or anything else, something wrong with shoes, feet. So first at those physicals, look at those physicals. If there's nothing, no problem with the physicals, then go to sensory sensitivities. So these are our 7 senses. 5 typical ones are tactile, or our sense of touch, auditory, or our sense of hearing, visual, or our sense of seeing, gustatory, or our sense of taste, olfactory, or our sense of smell, vestibular, is probably a new sense to you guys, which is sense of balance. So when we are standing up, sitting down, lying down, running, we're using this sense. When we're moving, this sense helps us to keep our balance, to know how much power we need to put into our feet or our body, to weight that we need to put into our body to keep it balanced. And then the last sense is proprioception, or spatial awareness, or our body's GPS system, basically, to know where we are in this space. To help you to understand this, you can close your eyes, put your hands like this, apart from each other. Close your eyes and try to touch your fingertips. If you can find your fingertips with your eyes closed, you know that you haven't used your eyes to find where your hands are, but you know where your fingertips are in this space. We also use the sense to talk, to pronounce the sounds, to know how to move our tongue and lips to pronounce different sounds. We can't see how we're talking, but we know how we're moving our mouth because we have this GPS system in our body. For all of these senses, as you can see on this line here, we can be hyposensitive, which is when we need more of that sense, or we are low sensitive to that sense and we're not registering that sense enough, to hypersensitive, which we are too sensitive to that sense and we are trying to avoid that sense. So we can be anywhere on the spectrum for any of these senses. So here are some examples of behaviors that show us there is sensory sensitivity. So like I hate having my hair washed or cut. That is sensory sensitivity. That is a behavior of a child who hates their hair being washed or cut. Tells us, okay, there is sensory sensitivity involved here. Or I cry and shield my eyes from the sun and other bright lights. So sensory sensitivity. Again, remember to think about the physicals first. So think there isn't any problem with the eyesight, and if there is not, then it is sensory sensitivity. I have sensitive hearing or difficulty listening, selective hearing or difficulty listening. Sorry, these are too small and I'm trying to read them out to you guys because you won't be able to read. So sometimes I make a mistake with reading them. I hardly can see them. I try to remember them. I am a picky eater. And I complain about tags in my clothing. I seem unaware of touch or pain or other things related to touch. I hate being tickled or cuddled. Of gross motor skills or poor gross motor skills or anything that relates to movement, and I always walk on my tippy toes. So these are behaviors that we see in people that indicates there is sensory sensitivities. We can look deeply into these. We are going to have some examples today and look into those ones. And here are some more examples of behaviors that show us their sensory sensitivities. I have trouble focusing and or concentrating on something. I am very sensitive to loud sounds like vacuums or lawnmowers. I am always smelling people, food, and objects. I have poor fine motor skills, like for painting, drawing, those kind of skills. I sit with my legs in a W position, like legs spread on the floor, because a person wants to feel more of the ground. And I put my socks on just so, or maybe I just go bare feet. I never go bare feet. So that is, these are behaviors. So everything that's related to our senses. So basically to those 7 senses that you can see, all the behaviors you can think, these are sensory sensitivities. Like avoiding certain sounds, certain lights, smells, or being drawn to tasting everything, smelling everything, those. So here is a video to give us a glimpse into sensory overload in everyday life. Yeah, a great video to show us many of these sounds are everyday sounds that, well, for us, we can ignore those sounds. Like we go to a coffee shop and we can ignore all the sounds and we can focus on our conversation with somebody. But when a person has sensory sensitivities and they hear every sound that loud, then they cannot ignore that and they cannot focus on the talk. All they're going to hear is that, and they're going to be overwhelmed by those loud sounds. And then the other sense that we have is this interoception, which is our internal sense. It's a sense that allows us to feel sensations from the inside of our bodies. So when you're hungry, when you're thirsty, sleepy, tired, overwhelmed, anxious, stressed, relaxed, in a hurry, all those, we feel them with this interoception. So if we don't have good interoception, we won't feel our internal feelings. We won't know when we are hungry, or we might be mistaken by our internal feelings. So like, for example, take our hunger as being sleepy and go to sleep instead of eating something, or any other thing that can be mixed up. So goosebumps, tears, hair on end, shaky body, butterflies in tummy, tight throat, wobbly knees, sweaty palms, stuck feet, thumping heart, feels like going to the toilet. So those are all the signs, our internal sense that is telling our brain what we need. And so interoception skills require people to understand all these, being aware of internal body states, awareness of feelings and emotions, awareness of impact of external stimuli on self. So this is all our internal sense that we use all these sources to understand what's happening in our body. And you can imagine, if we don't have great sense of interoception or this internal sense, we might have toileting accidents because we won't know when to use the toilet. So toilet training somebody who doesn't have great interoception can be really hard. This is also linked to that self-regulation that we talked in the last webinar. If we can't figure out when this is getting out of hand and too much and catch it there, we won't be able to respond to it. And then we won't be able to calm ourselves down because we can't catch it on time. So it can interfere with lots of behaviors for autistic people or the person who does have sensory sensitivity. Then our next topic, which is kind of related to our sensory sensitivities, is the stimming or self-stimulatory behaviors, or the repetitive behaviors that people show, also known as stereotypy or self-stimulatory behavior. Stimming can be repetitive body movements, repetitive movement of objects like spinning something, repetitive noise or sound like tapping something all the time or making a sound. Can you identify any stims in yourself? Us neurotypicals, we stim, right? Like we fiddle with our jewelry or necklace or something. We shake our leg when we are sitting. We pace. We play piano, which is a type of stimming. So we do all sorts of things to stim, repetitive movement. Why do we stim? Sometimes we stim because we enjoy doing it. So it is a source of enjoyment. Sometimes we stim because it's a coping mechanism for stress or anxiety. Like when we are in public talking, we are stressed and we play with fiddle with something. This is our defense mechanism. We stim to reduce sensory input. So when things are too much, we stim to reduce that. So like when there's too much sound, we might stim by making sound just to black out all that sound, or we might stim by screaming and shouting. Or we stim for sensory stimulation, like shaking that leg, which is giving that sense basically to our body. So these are the reasons that us neurotypicals stim because of them. And the same reasons apply for people who have sensory sensitivities, or autistic people, or autistic people who have sensory sensitivities, or autistic people who might stim. So they might stim for the same 4 reasons that we might stim for them. That is why stims serve a purpose. So we don't try and change it if it is safe for the person. Allow them to stim. We have a few case studies that you can do them in your own time. Think about them. So I'm going to read about them, and then I'll tell you what it is, what the answer is, but try and think them for yourself too, okay? Before going into that, we have a video here that is going to give us an idea of sensory sensitivities.
Six, 7, 8, 9. Take my hand. No, Alex. No, it's fine, isn't it? It's fine. I'm not naughty. I'm autistic. And I just get too much information.
Now, a great tool to help us with sensory sensitivities is creating a sensory profile. So this is an example of profile that we have filled out, but you can fill out your own profile. It's easy. It has a column that is touch, sound. So you put the senses in that column, the first column. So touch, sound, vision, taste, smell, movement or balance, spatial awareness, or proprioception. You can add interoception to it, or you can leave it out. Then we have two other columns. One of them is undersensitive or needs more of the sense. The other one is oversensitive or needs less of the sense. So hyposensitive and hypersensitive. So this example is for touch. Somebody who has low reaction to pain or temperature is undersensitive. And somebody who can't tolerate new clothes or certain fabrics is oversensitive. Somebody who likes loud music, crowds, and traffic is undersensitive when it comes to sound. And then somebody who covers their ears, they're oversensitive. A person who has fascination with patterns, spinning objects is undersensitive with vision. So it's looking for complex things to look at, or like looking through the corner of their eyes. And people who avoid direct eye contact, they are sensitive, overly sensitive to vision. People who like non-food items, they are undersensitive to taste. People who avoid any new food opportunities, they stick to the ones that they know. They're oversensitive to taste. A person who is undersensitive to smell might sniff everything, and a person who's oversensitive to smell might run away or withdraw from certain odors. A person who is undersensitive to sense of balance or vestibular might enjoy swinging, rocking, spinning, or the person who does not like to be knocked or rough play, they might be oversensitive to sense of balance. Person who enjoys jumping and push and pull activities, pushing, pulling using big muscles, pushing, pulling heavy things, they are undersensitive to proprioception or spatial awareness or body awareness. And the person who can appear to have low muscle tone and be clumsy and want to lie down or be really grounded, they are the ones that usually are oversensitive to body awareness. So you can fill out your own sensory profile. These are some sensory tools that, remember that sensory box that we talked about, that you put sensory items or tools in there to help people to get enough sensory experience. These are some tools that you can use. Sensory Sam has their own examples on their website. So these jewelries or these blankets or the heavy weighted blankets or weighted vests or earmuffs, noise cancelling earmuffs, or any other sensory toys that they have, those tools on their website, Sensory Sam or Sensory Corner or autismresources.co.org or sensoryhavenforkids.com. All of these are great places to look for them. So here are those case examples that I talked about before. One is Hemi. Hemi screws up his eyes in bright light and avoids rooms with fluorescent lights. Why might this be, and what can you do to make the environment more comfortable for Hemi? Think about Hemi. So it's related to eyes, right? So it is the sight, and he is avoiding it. So he's too sensitive to the sight. So what can you do to make environment more comfortable for him? Think of different things. Might wear a cap, might wear dark glasses, might not go to places with fluorescent lights, or turn those lights off when you go there. And then Hannah. When Hannah is in her art group, she stares at the carpet, which has a bold geometric pattern, and doesn't hear a word you say. Why is this, and what can you do to help? So it's about staring at something, which means it's about vision or seeing. And then she stares at it, so she's asking more of that vision or seeing. So she is hyposensitive or wants more of that sense. So what can you do? You need to offer this for her. So one thing that's very important for us to understand when it comes to sensory sensitivities is that being low sensitive to something is as important as being highly sensitive to something. We usually have more empathy towards the ones who are highly sensitive to something, but not to the ones who are low sensitive to something. So that is equally important. Tim and Jenny. Tim loves to sing and bang doors all the time, which causes annoyance to those around him. Jenny frequently covers her ears when indoors. Who's hypersensitive and who's hyposensitive, and what can you do? So of course, Tim asks for more, right? So he is hyposensitive, so he's low sensitive. And then Jenny covers her ears, so he avoids it. So he's avoiding the sense, so he's hypersensitive or highly sensitive to the sound. So what can you do? Of course, with Tim, it's important to give him this sense. So to give him opportunities to be loud, to bang on things, and to have loud music because he needs it. And for Jenny, it's important to give her the opportunity, to take away these sounds from her environment, or give her noise cancelling earphones or anything that might reduce the sound. Then we have Leo, who has just chewed his way through his third iPad case. The iPad is his communication device, so you cannot just take it away. Well, why might he be doing this, and what can you do? So this is basically Leo is around chewing, so he wants to chew things. This is related to his mouth. It could be related to oral proprioception, which is spatial awareness around oral muscles. Could also be related to taste or touch, so it can be related to different things. But what can you do? You need to give him this sense. He needs more of it, so you need to give him this sense. Those jewelry necklaces are great for this. He can chew on them, or other things that he can chart, things that he can chew on them, so that he doesn't need to chew on his iPad. Lara is normally calm and cooperative, but reacts strongly when a particular psychologist visits your service. By chance, another co-worker comments on how he is irritated by the strong smell of the psychologist's perfume. Lara confirms that she finds the smell very distressing. How might you deal with this? So, well, a psychologist who's coming to visit somebody who has sensory sensitivities obviously should be notified that she has that sensory sensitivities, so we can talk to the psychologist and tell her that not to wear that perfume, because Laura is sensitive, overly sensitive to the smell, so she doesn't like that smell. So the kind thing or the nice thing to do would be to avoid wearing that smell around Lara. And this is really important for us to know that. In the past, before we heard from autistic people, we used to think, okay, so we don't have these sensory sensitivities. We can ask them, we can tolerate the smell. I mean, we can tolerate this smell. Just come on, just tolerate it. But it's important to know that it's really, it's hurting them, and it is a person who has sensory sensitivities can be really hurt by those smells that she is too sensitive to. So it's important for us to take that away from them and to support them to have that environment that they don't need to have that smell in their environment. So supporting a person who has sensory sensitivities involves supporting them around their sensory needs, whether it is seeking a sensory item that we need to provide for them, or avoiding certain senses. So we need to advocate for them, be their voice to help them to avoid those senses. In this case, talk to the psychologist. And then Messina is inclined to sit down during games in the courtyard and hates riding the escalator at the shopping mall. What sense is she likely to be hypersensitive to? It's around balance, isn't it? Most likely around balance. And what can you do to include her in games and make trips to the mall more enjoyable for her? So if there is another option other than escalator, a lift, or stairs, steps, we might stick to those. Or if she's happier to stay on the first floor and to go up, we might stick to the first floor. Or if she's happier to go to a different shopping mall which doesn't have that escalator, we might go to that shopping mall. So whatever works, basically. And then what can you do to include her in games? Well, you sitting down games, or put a chair for her to sit down and be outside and play with others, or use any of these that work. And then Vermo tends to be in your face and frequently bumps into people and furniture, so you can't judge how far away he is from people, or his judgment is different to other people from this distance. So this is around that body's GPS system, right? Where we are in the space, proprioception. So he needs to be too close to people, so he needs to have too much feedback through proprioception. So he has high pulse sensitivity when it comes to proprioception. And what can you do? Well, there are different things that you can do. Some of them is to give him, so he's hypersensitive, so he needs more of the sense. Give him the sense. Wrap him in a tight blanket, or help him to go under tight spaces. Give him opportunities to have the sense of tight places or tight spaces. And then give him an indication of how far he is from different people. So like maybe give him like, okay, put your hand out and then measure by your arm length if you are too close. So you need to be like a hand length, arm length away from other people, for example, when you're talking. So give them some sort of indication so that they know how they can measure this space. Environmental accommodations. Now we know that sensory sensitivities can impact a person's well-being. So it's our duties as support people or their family members to help them to make some environmental accommodations. Small changes to the environment can make a difference to well-being, happiness, and behaviors that we see in people who have sensory sensitivities. Be aware of the environment. Look around to see if it is creating any difficulties for people with autism or for autistic people. Be prepared. Tell autistic people about possible sensory stimuli in different environments. Ask about sensory needs before meeting with someone. So if you are that psychologist going to meet someone who is autistic, ask about their sensory needs. Or if you want to take them somewhere to that shopping mall, think about it. Think in advance what could be there that can be overly stimulating to this person, and what can I do around that. So maybe we can give them some sort of like meeting their sensory needs. So give them some sort of well, whatever it is. So it depends on what sensory sensitivity they're going to be experiencing in that situation. So depending on that, we can give them appropriate tools. So for example, if it is smell, maybe a mask, they can wear a mask. Or if it is lights, maybe they can wear dark glasses or a cap. Maybe they can wear noise cancelling earmuffs. Be prepared, and being prepared for what they're gonna see there or experience there in advance, and knowing what they're gonna experience is a great help too. We already talked about stimming. So stimming, as we talked before, can be related to sensory sensitivities. To reduce sensory input. It can be there to reduce sensory input of a person. And that's important to know too when we are trying to understand the stimming. So we need to remember these things about stimming altogether. Stims serve a purpose. If it is safe, allow the person to stim. If necessary, teach about private and public stims. Sometimes that is necessary. Ensure stims will be appropriate at any age. So a stim that a child stims like touching a woman's legs when they are wearing these pantyhose, and then that's cute for a 3-year-old or even 5-year-old, but when they grow older and they become 18, that's not going to be cute anymore. So we need to teach them appropriate stims, and if that is the stimming, we need to replace it by something. But when we are replacing, think of that sensory input that the person is receiving. So if it is the feel of touching this the material over the skin, maybe we can put similar material over their arm so that they can stim by touching their own arm. And then stigmatization. Does this matter? If it matters for the person and they want to change it, then it's our duty to help them to change it, to support them to change the stimming. But if it's not stigmatizing for the person, just because we don't like that stimming, it doesn't mean that we should change that stimming. So, for example, there was this boy who loved to feel of blankie, that satin, the blankies that have satin edges and it's woolen, so like baby blankies. So he loved touching this blankie. And then when he was little, he was like in primary school, he had his blankie with him and nobody cared and people knew him, and it was a small school, so everybody knew him. But then when he grew, like he grew older, he thought, and he was going to go to high school, so he thought he would be teased at high school to use that, to take that blankie with him. So he was concerned. So his mom helped him by cutting a piece of that blankie and sewing it into his pocket so that he could put his hand into his pocket and touch that and have that, get that sensory feeling without being stigmatized. So when it matters for the autistic person, that is when we help them to figure out an alternative. When you want to find an alternative, when you want to change the stimming, you need to find the alternative that gives the person the same sensory feeling. So that's when your sensory profile can come handy. And also, if the person is motivated to change it, then you want to change it. Otherwise, you can't just force people to change their sensory input because, well, they're enjoying that sensory input. So why would we? Because it serves a purpose. Okay, this brings us to the end of our second session on sensory sensitivities. So we talked about what sensory sensitivities are, and then how we can support those. And then we talked about our stimming related to sensory sensitivity. Hope you enjoyed this session and this was helpful for you, but you can always come to our website if you have our live chat, basically, if you have more questions on this and you want to know more about it.